Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayanti Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistike. We're continuing with the discussion on Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita by Satsvarup Das Goswami, Volume 2, Planting the Seed, New York City, 1965 to 1966, Chapter 17, on the Bowery. So Prabhupada is living in the Bowery in that studio with David Allen, and he was getting few students coming to learn Sanskrit or Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada was translating and giving lectures, giving them company, doing everything. Now he's trying to teach them how to cook. Carol Baker came from an immigrant Catholic background, and she immediately associated with Catholicism. The Swami's presence as a spiritual authority and his devotional practices of chanting on beads and reciting from Sanskrit scriptures. Sometimes she would accompany Prabhupada to a nearby Chinatown, where he would purchase ingredients for his cooking. He would cook daily, and sometimes Carol and others would come by to learn the secrets of cooking for Lord Krishna. Carol. He used to cook with us in the kitchen, and he was always aware of everyone else's activities in addition to his own cooking. He knew exactly how things should be. He watched everything and made sure everyone did everything correctly. He was a teacher. We used to make chapatis by hand, but then one day he asked me to get him a rolling pin. I brought my rolling pin and he appropriated it. He put some men on rolling chapatis and supervised them very carefully. I made a chutney for him at home. He always accepted our gifts graciously, although I don't think he ever ate them. Perhaps he was worried we might put in something that wasn't allowed in his diet. He used to take things from me, put them in the cupboard. I don't know what he finally did with them, but I'm sure he didn't throw them away. I never saw him eat anything that I had prepared, although he accepted everything. So careful Prabhupada was. Prabhupada held his evening meetings on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, just as he had uptown. The loft was out of the way for most of the acquaintances, and it was on the Bowery. A cluster of sleeping derelicts regularly blocked the street-level entrance, and visitors would find as many as half a dozen bumps to step over before climbing the 4 flights of stairs. But it was something new. You could go and sit with a group of hip people and watch the Swami lead kirtan. The room was dimly lit and Prabhupada would burn incense. Many casual visitors came and went. One of them, Ganthar, had vivid impressions. Ganthar. He walked right off the Bowery into a room filled with incense. It was quiet. Everyone was talking in hushed tones, not really talking at all. Swamiji was sitting in front of the room and in meditation. There was a tremendous feeling of peace, which I have never had before. I had happened to have studied for 2 years to become a minister and was into meditation, study, and prayer. But this was my first time to do anything, Eastern or Hindu. There were lots of pillows around and mats on the floor for people to sit on. I don't think there were any pictures or statues. It was just Swamiji, incense and mats, and obviously the respect of the people in the room for him. Before we went up, Carl was laughing and saying how Swami wanted everyone to use the hand symbols just correctly. I had never played the symbol before, but when it began, I just tried to follow Swamiji, who was doing it in a certain way. Things were building up. The sound was building up, but then someone was doing it wrong. And Swamiji just very, very calmly shook a finger at someone and they looked. And then everything stopped. He instructed this person from a distance, and this fellow got the right idea, and they started up again. See, playing kartal in the kirtan, one has to follow the tal properly, otherwise we can mess up. After a few minutes, the sound of the cymbals and the incense, we weren't in the Bowery any longer. We started chanting Hare Krishna. That was my first experience in chant. I never chanted before. There is nothing in Protestant religion that comes even close to that. Maybe Catholics with their Hail Marys, but it's not quite the same thing. It was relaxing and very interesting to be able to chant. And I found Swamiji very fascinating. The loft was more open than Prabhupada's previous place uptown, so there was less privacy. And here some of the visitors were skeptical and even challenging, but everyone found him confident and joyful. He seemed to have far-reaching plans and he had dedication. He knew what he wanted to do and was single-handedly carrying it out. It's not one man's job, he had said, but he went on doing all he could, depending on Krishna for the results. David was beginning to help and more people were coming by to visit him. Almost all of Prabhupada's Bowery friends were musicians or friends of musicians. They were into music, drugs, women, and spiritual meditation. Because Prabhupada's presentation of the Hare Krishna mantra was both musical and meditative, they were automatically interested. Prabhupada stressed that all the Vedic mantras or hymns were sung. In fact, the words Bhagavad Gita meant the song of God, but the words of the Vedic hymns were incarnations of God in the form of transcendental sound. The musical accompaniment of hand cymbals, drum, and harmonium was just that, an accompaniment, and had no spiritual purpose independent of the chanting of the name of God. Prabhupada allowed any instrument to be used as long as it did not detract from the chanting. Carol. It was a very interracial, music-oriented scene. There were a few professional musicians and a lot of people who enjoyed playing or just listening. Some people were painting in some of the lots, and that's basically what's going on. We had memorable kirtans. One time there was a beautiful ceremony. Some of us went over early to prepare for it. There must have been 100 people who came that day. From the Bowery crowd, sound was spirit and spirit was sound, in a merging of music and meditation. But for Prabhupada, music without the name of God wasn't meditation. It was sense gratification, or at most a kind of stylized impersonal meditation. But he was glad to see the musicians coming to play along in his kirtans, to hear him and to chant responsibly. Some, having stayed up all night playing somewhere on the instruments, would come by in the morning and sing with the Swami. He did not dissuade them from their focus on sound, rather he gave them sound. In the Vedas, sound is said to be the first element of material creation. The source of sound is God, and God is eternally a person. Prabhupada's emphasis was on getting people to chant God's personal, transcendental name, whether they took it as jazz, folk music, rock, or Indian meditation made no difference, as long as they began to chant Hare Krishna. So accommodating Prabhupada was. People wanted to come just for music, that is fine. But as long as chanting is involved, that is fine. Then everything is okay. Because he knew chanting of the holy names will transform their heart. And if they want to come just for music, fine, but chant. Carol. Whenever he had the chanting, the people were fairly in the awe of the Swami. On the Bowery, a kind of transcendence came out of the ringing of the cymbals. He used the harmonium and many people played hand cymbals. Sometimes he played the drum. In the very beginning, he stressed the importance of sound and the realization of Godhead through sound. That was, I suppose, the attraction that these musicians found in him. The emphasis on sound as a means to attaining transcendence and the Godhead. But he wanted a serious thing. He was interested in discipleship. One serious newcomer was Michael Grant. Mike was 24. His father, who was Jewish, owned a record shop in Portland, Oregon, where Mike grew up. After studying music at Portland's Reed College and at San Francisco State, Mike, who played the piano and many other instruments, moved to New York City along with his girlfriend, hoping to get into music professionally. But he quickly became disenchanted with the commercial music scene. Playing in nightclubs and pandering to commercial demand seemed particularly unappealing. In New York, he joined the Musicians Union and worked as a musical arranger and as an agent for several local groups. Mike lived on the Bowery in an AIR loft on Grant Street. It was a large loft where musicians often congregated for jam sessions. But as he turned more and more to serious composing, he found himself retiring from the social side of the music scene. His interests ran more to the spiritual, quasi-spiritual, and mystical books he had been reading. He had encountered several swamis, yogis, and self-styled spiritualists in the city and had taken up Hatha Yoga. From his first meeting with the Swami, Mike was interested and quite open, as he was with all religious persons. He thought all genuinely religious persons were good, although he did not care to identify with any particular group. Mike. There was a little bit of familiarity because I had seen other Swamis. The way he was dressed, the way he looked older and swarthy, weren't new to me. But at the same time, there was an element of novelty. I was very curious. I did not hear him talk when I first came in. He was just chanting. But mainly I was waiting to hear what he was going to say. I had already heard people chant before. I thought, why else would he put himself in such a place without any comforts, unless a message he is trying to get across is more important than his own comfort? See, people were noticing all this. That what is he trying to do? What exactly is his aim? I think the thing that struck me the most was the poverty that was all around him. This was curious because the places that I had been before had been just the opposite, very opulent. There was a Vedanta center in Upper Manhattan and others. They were filled with staid, older men with the leather chairs and pipe, tobacco, that kind of environment. But this was real poverty. The whole thing was curious. The Swami looked very refined, which was also curious that he was in this place. When he talked, I immediately saw that he was a scholar and that he spoke with great conviction. Some statements he made were very daring. He was talking about God, and this was all new to hear someone talk about God. I always wanted to hear someone I could respect talk about God. I always liked to hear religious speakers, but I measured them very carefully. When he spoke, I began to think, well, here is someone talking about God who may really have some realization of God. He was the first one I had come across who might be a person of God, who could feel really deeply. Mike Grant. So later we'll see who became who, because some of them, or maybe most of them, got initiated later on. Prabhupada is lecturing. Shri Krishna is just trying to place Arjuna on the platform of working in pure consciousness. We have already discussed for so many days that we are not this dull body, but we are consciousness. Somehow or other, we are in contact with matter. Therefore, our freedom is checked. Attendance is better now than it had been uptown. The loft offers a larger space. In fact, the platform where Prabhupada sits nearly equals the area of his entire office cubicle on 72nd Street. The dingy loft with its unpainted rafters is more like an old warehouse than a temple. The members of his audience, most of the musicians, have come to meditate on the mystical sounds of Swami's Kirtan. Carl, Carol, Gunther, Mike, David, the crowd from the Paradox, and others join him on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday night, when he holds classes beginning punctually at 8 o'clock. The program consists of half an hour of chanting Hare Krishna, followed by a lecture from Bhagavad Gita, usually 45 minutes long. then a question and answer session, and finally another half hour of chanting, and everything ending by 10 o'clock. The kirtan has just ended, and Swamiji is speaking. As spiritual beings, we're free to act, free to have anything, pure, no contamination, no disease, no birth, no death, no old age. And besides that, we have got many, many other qualifications in our spiritual life. When he speaks, he is pure spiritual form. The Vedic scriptures say that a sadhu, a saint, is not seen but heard. If the people in the audience want to know Swamiji, they will have to hear him. He is no longer simply the old Indian immigrant who lives on the other side of the partitions of this loft, hanging his clothes to dry, barely getting his meals. But now he is speaking as the emissary of Lord Krishna, beyond time and space, and hundreds of spiritual masters in a chain of disciplic succession are speaking through him. He has entered amid New York bohemians in 1966, saying that 1966 is temporary and illusory, that he is eternal and they are eternal. This was the meaning of the kirtan. And now he is explaining it philosophically, advocating a total change in consciousness. Yet knowing that they cannot take it all, he urges them to take whatever they can. Means whatever they understand, that is fine. You will be glad to hear that this process of spiritual realization, once begun, guarantees one to have his next life as a human being. Once karma yoga is begun, it will continue. It doesn't matter. Even if one fails to complete the course, he's not a loser. He's not a loser. Now, if someone begins this yoga of self-realization, but unfortunately cannot prosecute this task in a nice way, if he falls down from the path, still there is encouragement that you're not a loser. You'll be given a chance next life, and the next life is not ordinary next life. And for one who is successful, oh, what to speak of it? The successful goes back to Godhead. So we are holding this class. And although you have multifarious duties, you come here thrice a week and try to understand. And this will not go in vain. Even if you stop coming here, that impression will never go. I tell you, the impression will never go. If you do some practical work, that is very, very nice. But even if you do not do any practical work, simply if you give your submissive oral reception, means if you just submissively hear it, then understand what is the nature of God. If you simply hear and have an idea, even then you will be free from this material bondage. So powerful. He's talking to a crowd who are deeply set in their hip life. He knows that they cannot immediately give up taking drugs, and there they sit with their common law wives. Their path is to play music, live with the women, and meditate sometimes, and be free. After hearing his lecture, they'll stay up all night with the instrument, the women, the drugs, the interracial bohemian dance, the bohemian scene. Yet somehow they're drawn to Swamiji. He's got the good vibrations of the kirtan, and they want to help him out. They're glad to help because he has no one else. So Prabhupada is saying to them, that is all right. Even if you can only do a little, it will be good for you. We are all pure spirit souls, but you have forgotten. You have fallen into the cycle of birth and death. Whatever you can do towards reviving your original consciousness is good for you. There is no loss. Means whatever little bit you can do in this life, it stays with you always. The Swami's main stress is on what he calls dovetailing your consciousness with the Supreme Consciousness. Krishna is the Supreme Consciousness, and Arjuna, as a representative individual consciousness, is asked to act intelligently in collaboration with the Supreme Consciousness. Then he will be free from the bondage of birth, death, old age, and disease. Consciousness is a popular word in America. There is consciousness, expansion, cosmic consciousness. consciousness, altered states of consciousness, and now dovetailing the individual consciousness with the supreme consciousness. This is the perfection of consciousness. Prabhupada explains. This is the love and peace that everyone is really after. And yet Prabhupada talks of it in terms of war. Because Bhagavad Gita was spoken in the middle of the battlefield. Okay, I guess we can stop here. See anybody have any questions or comments?
Nice class, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you, Mata. Chalo, you all have safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada.